Cheney Lake, Kansas, a sailing oasis on the plains. Is it in danger from toxic solar farms? In today's show, we look at solar farms and the Cheney Lake Watershed. There's a battle raging against commercial solar farms in Reno County. This is part of a bigger war for market share that started at the national level and has now filtered down to my neck of the woods. In this series, I examine individual aspects of this struggle in depth to see how well they hold up under scrutiny. Our story begins in November of 2023 with our Reno County Planning Commission working on a fairly reasonable set of regulations for commercial solar farms. They held their hearings for public comments on November 9th. At the hearing, 11 Reno County households testified against solar farms in the Cheney Lake Watershed. A local anti-renewables advocate also presented a petition to keep solar farms out of the watershed. There was almost no support at the hearing for a countywide ban. Mind you, there are over 61,000 people who live in Reno County. At the very next Reno County Commission meeting, Commissioner Ron Hurst decided it was time to ban commercial solar farms countywide, using the testimony given at the November planning hearing as justification. Commissioner Parks and Bogner were on board for a ban as well. Something to keep in mind is that every acre of land in our county and state is in a watershed in one way or another. This Kansas Department of Agriculture map vividly illustrates that. So, while we may be focusing on a single lake and watershed, this battle has broader implications. There are already existing documented risks to this watershed, mostly related to agriculture, which I'll cover a bit later in this episode. But for now, I'll focus on the opposition to commercial solar farms in the Cheney Lake Watershed. Let's start with the petition, which had over 300 signatures and stated,
"We, the undersigned Reno County citizens and landowners, are requesting a prohibition of commercial utility-scale solar projects in the Cheney Lake Watershed area of Reno County, Kansas."
No reasons were given, just a prohibition request. Did our local Republicans group work with anti-renewables advocates on this one? I've watched as Republican groups across Kansas have worked to stoke hate and fear of renewables, so it wouldn't surprise me and would help explain the number of signatures. Next comes Dennis Hedke, an out-of-county former state representative and contract geophysicist whose client list included 30 or more regional oil and gas companies. Mr. Hedke is a long-time anti-renewables activist.
The multiple hailstorms, tornadoes, all the weather-related incidents that happen in this state, that solar panels are just not a good place for that to be implanted. And I certainly disagree with the suggestion that the toxic materials that are in those panels are not a risk. They're a high risk. And so when you have a hailstorm such as what happened in Scottsbluff, Nebraska occur, there will be toxic materials released out of that installation. There is no question about it. You can't stop it. Cannot stop it. And they are carcinogens and other things that you just don't want to dump into the watershed.
In our county, we face many threats: aging infrastructure, population loss, economic decline, dwindling water levels, agricultural pollution, wildfires, species invasions, etc. Are commercial solar farms a threat as well? First, let's take a look at the toxic damaged solar panel accusation. Modern solar panels used in solar farms come in two varieties: crystalline, silicon, and thin film. Crystalline silicon panels account for around 95% of the panels installed in projects today. The ingredient here of concern is lead, with the average panel containing around 14 grams of lead encapsulated in a glass and plastic matrix surrounded by an aluminum frame. These panels can also contain small amounts of copper and silver. For comparison, your car battery holds over 8,000 grams of lead. The lead is part of the solder connections tying the various cells in the panel together electrically. How dangerous is the lead in these panels? Well, basically, solar panels are put together kind of like the safety glass in your car's windshield, with layers of tempered glass and flexible plastic laminated together under heat and pressure. In the event of large hail, the laminated glass absorbs the impact and the plastic holds the panel together. These panels are very tough and have to pass stringent impact-resistant testing. For example, this is a photo of the hail damage my RV sustained in 2013, which totaled the trailer. Notice one of my solar panels in the background showing no sign of damage at all. The lead solder lines in these panels are not brittle. They are semi-flexible and will deform and possibly tear under severe impact, but not shatter. If there were lead debris lying on the ground, which is a remote possibility, they would most likely still have the plastic encapsulation attached. Also, lead is not soluble in water. The risk of lead contaminating the soil in this way is extremely minimal. If lead lying on the ground for a short period was actually an issue, then hunting would be completely banned nationwide, and an old barn with flaking lead paint would instantly become a Superfund site. For comparison, shotgun shells contain on average 28 grams of lead, which is directly injected into the environment with every trigger pull. In a detailed study of a lake similar in size to Cheney, they measured 45,000 grams of lead fishing tackle being lost into the lake annually. Considering Cheney Lake has been around for 59 years, extrapolated out, one could assume there's been nearly 2.5 million grams of lost lead tackle deposited in the lake, with most of that still buried in the muddy bottom. To finalize our lead toxicity coverage, let's do a thought experiment.
Under normal conditions, lead does not react with water. It requires lead compounds and acidic water to start a reaction. But let's pretend we're in an alternate universe where lead is readily soluble in water. The EPA allows 15 parts per billion of lead in an untreated public drinking water source as its upper limit. Since the average solar panel contains 14 grams of lead, to get to the EPA limit, this would take 1,793,711 solar panels ground up into powder and spread over the lake to achieve this limit.
Lead in our drinking water carries grave health risks. If we are serious about reducing lead levels, we need to look to our own individual plumbing and our municipal supply lines first, as many contain lead. That's where the real risk is. The other type of solar panels, thin film panels, make up around 5% of the panels now being installed and have cadmium telluride as the ingredient of concern. Anti-solar advocates say these panels contain cadmium, which is inaccurate and misleading. They contain cadmium telluride. Water has hydrogen in it, but you wouldn't say water is hydrogen, would you? Cadmium telluride is much safer than cadmium, is insoluble in water, and has low acute inhalation, oral, and aquatic toxicity. Thin film panels are less expensive to manufacture and produce more power in hot and humid climates. Tellurium, the metal combined with cadmium to form cadmium telluride, is as rare as platinum. There are currently robust recycling programs in place for these panels, as the tellurium must be recycled if we are to be able to produce thin film panels in the future. Thin film panels are built just like the silicon ones, so all of the physical properties of silicon panels apply to thin film panels as well. Interestingly, I've read toxicity studies where researchers ground up thin film panels to test them under long-term acid baths. These researchers had difficulty pulverizing the cadmium telluride film layer as it was so flexible that it gummed up their machines. Regardless of which type solar panel is used, it's in the best interest of the solar farm to become fully operational again. So in the event of a major weather event, restoration is a top priority and will happen as fast as the supply chain allows. After a catastrophic hail event, most likely a company specializing in cleanup and restoration will be hired to come out and pick up the debris laying on the ground, if any, and unbolt the damaged panels and then install new ones. So, my answer to this accusation of toxic panels is no. Solar panels are not toxic, not even after a hailstorm, and they do not present a toxic threat to the Cheney Lake Watershed. And finally, let's address Mr. Hedke's accusation concerning the damaged solar farm in Nebraska. The 4.3 megawatt solar farm in Scottsbluff was damaged by hail on June 23, 2023 by the same storm cell that injured 8 people at a Wyoming coal mine. It was a ferocious storm. Mr. Hedke's accusation is quite interesting, as one of our Reno County planning commissioners actually contacted the solar farm operators at the Nebraska Public Power District and specifically asked them what happened after the hailstorm destroyed the solar farm there. Our planning commissioner was told that while many of the panels were severely damaged, there were no debris on the ground to pick up. None. They simply carefully unbolted and removed the damaged panels and installed new ones. So much for Mr. Hedke's accusation. Interesting side note, FEMA's National Hail Risk Index actually has Reno County listed as relatively low risk on their latest hail map for Kansas. Additionally, solar trackers can work to help prevent hail damage by stowing the panels at a steep angle so hail would skip off of them. Trackers have a side benefit of allowing moisture and light to penetrate under the panels, reducing runoff and promoting plant growth. That's why I recommend solar trackers for most every solar farm, and it's a key part of low-impact solar farm design. Now, let's discuss the issues the watershed is facing. If you're truly concerned with the well-being of Cheney Lake, this is where one could focus their energies. The Cheney Lake Watershed is fairly large and encompasses 5 different counties. Over 99% of the watershed is used for agricultural purposes. There are documented risks to the watershed. A group, Cheney Lake Watershed, Inc., was formed in the 1990s to address these. According to the 2019 Cheney Lake Watershed Restoration and Protection Strategies Plan, produced by Cheney Watershed, Inc., KDHE, and K-State, the 2 top issues are siltation and excess nutrient loading. First, let's look at erosion and siltation. The current estimated sediment load in the Cheney Lake watershed is 226,500 tons per year, according to the Kansas Department of Health and Environment. The average transparency of the lake is 1.3 feet. High rainfall events, most of which occur in late spring and early summer, are a prime cause of erosion and may coincide with planting periods when cropland has little or no crop residue. Likewise, grasses are short and do not catch runoff. Conventional tillage on agricultural cropland can have cumulative, detrimental erosive effects. Sediment transfer can also be caused by degraded pasture land. Next, excess nutrient loading. Nutrients come from fertilizer runoff and failed private wastewater systems. Nutrients and bacteria cause excess costs in treatment prior to public consumption. Algae blooms caused by excess nutrients also impact recreation on the lake. According to KDHE, the current estimated nitrogen load going into the Cheney Lake watershed is over 780,000 pounds per year, and the current estimated phosphorus load is over 129,000 pounds per year. Human population can also affect nutrient runoff. There are roughly 1,759 wastewater systems estimated in the Cheney Lake watershed. It is projected that nearly 20% of these may be failing, which translates into roughly 350 failed private wastewater systems. Pesticide residue can also be a concern. I attended a presentation by Cheney Lake Watershed, Inc. at the Dillon Nature Center in March of 2024. What I learned, in a nutshell, is that the group promotes no-tilling, crop rotation, precision fertilizer application, and livestock grazing to help protect the lake. At a bare minimum, they would like to eliminate plowing and tilling in the watershed. Their idea of utopia would be if they could get all landowners in the watershed to convert to native grassland while rotating through grazing livestock. Cheney Lake Watershed, Inc. relies on volunteers and works with landowners to implement their goals and arranges for landowner grants and incentives. Early on in the solar regulation process, Cheney Lake Watershed, Inc. was courted by local anti-renewables advocates, but they made it clear they wanted no part of the solar debate on either side and desired to remain neutral. Cheney Lake Watershed, Inc. even made a request to the Reno Planning Commission to not be named as an entity to be contacted for solar proposal review in the developing Reno County commercial solar farm regulations. The City of Wichita did provide input to the Reno Planning Commission early on. They were mostly concerned with sediment and asked for some common sense regulation additions such as stormwater and erosion control as a long-term maintenance item to be included in the developer agreement. Additionally, they thought it was wise to have the development plan address any potential pollutants that might be generated during the life of the project. The City of Wichita did not request a ban on solar. In March of 2024, our Reno Planning Commissioners finalized regulations for small solar farms of 10 acres or less. They discussed the toxic solar panels after a hailstorm accusation at length and found it had no merit. Thus, they did not prohibit these small solar farms from the Cheney Lake Watershed and sent the regulations to the Reno County Commissioners, who approved them on March 27, 2024. Now, small solar farms have just as many panels per acre as larger solar farms. If you believe that a 10-acre solar farm can be a good neighbor, then by logical extension, so can a larger solar farm. The overall impact per acre is exactly the same. By approving small solar farms without geographic restrictions, in my opinion, our county commissioners have left the door open to arguments for larger solar farms as well. Since 2005, we've built thousands of solar farms across the U.S. If water pollution, panel toxicity, panel fragility, and other accusations were an issue, we'd have empirical evidence of it by now. But we don't. Scores of studies show the exact opposite. As a society, emotions and politics seem to be taking precedence over facts. We invent perils while ignoring the real ones that are festering right in front of us. This is not healthy in the long run. Our children are going to inherit a warmer world with a much greater demand for electricity. Fossil fuels are not renewable and can have severe, documented, and very real side effects. For instance, the burning of coal releases mercury, cadmium, and lead into the air. In fact, everyone alive today has lead in their blood thanks to the burning of coal and leaded gasoline. The Cheney Lake Watershed contains lead from these sources as well. If we don't want our great-grandchildren to live in a Mad Max-like world, we need to stop squandering our fossil fuels and start adding renewables in significant quantities. Solar farms are not a challenge for Reno County. They are an opportunity. Thanks for watching.